Okay, I know what you're thinking. Retro Zoltan, why on earth are you reviewing the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, years after it was released? Well, I just happen to have an extremely good reason for waiting until now. And the reason is because... Okay, just kidding. But seriously, I get it. I bought this thing years ago. I admit when I first looked at this, I cringed because it was Android-based and I had no idea what to do with it. People were starting to talk more and more about Android performance, and I finally broke down and bought it. But pathetically, I put it back in the box to be looked at later. Time goes by fast, and I was finally ready to look away from the usuals, like Anbernic and Powkitty, as the Retroid rose up to the top of the pile. While it's ancient in handheld gaming standards, is it still relevant? Is it still worth looking at now? Let's find out and explore this together and find out. Right out the gate, I always try to see who's selling an item I'm reviewing. And when the official company store doesn't sell them anymore, I have to know why. It appears that Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, when it was originally released, had an outcry of complaints to where they made the Retro Pocket 2S to address these issues and change a few things and pretend the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus never happened. That's how it feels to me anyway. So if you want one, you're going to have to buy used or buy a new one off a random seller on AliExpress for an obscene amount of money. They're out there for normal prices, but you have to look hard. I say $75 and under for used and no more than $99 new. Don't pay a penny more. Before delving deeper, I wanted to give a slight history about Retroid and what they're all about. What's known about these guys? In early 2019, Go Retroid, a dynamic brand under Shen Zunlong Software Company, burst onto the scene with the original release of the original Retroid Pocket. Interestingly enough, the specific founders of the Go Retroid are a bit vague on public record. The only thing anyone knows for sure is that the parent company is known for producing single-board computers and other electronic devices, while the Retroid brand has become more popular for its focus on retro gaming handhelds. In the span of 5 years so far, Go Retroid pushed out several products, including the Pocket, Pocket 2, Pocket 2 Plus, which I have here, the Pocket 2S, the Pocket 3, the Pocket 3 Plus, the clamshell, Pocket Flip, Pocket 4, and not shockingly, the Pocket 4 Plus. Any bets on what the next release will be? The Retroid Pocket comes in a purple, a white, a yellow that some people are calling orange, and a black, which is what I purchased. I think there was a way originally to buy different shells and button color combinations and that sort of thing, but no more. You'll be hard-pressed to find any specific components, but most places selling them today may have a color combination you're looking for. Unboxing the item isn't that exciting, but it's certainly a different experience after messing with other handhelds for so long. It opens on the end and you slide out your plastic tray full of goodies. USB charging cable, of course, directions, a screen protector, which is a nice touch, and a Code 7 biodegradable plastic bag. The device itself feels heavy, 7.2 ounces to be exact, and to me it feels about the same size as a folded up DS. Just looking at it, it looks impressive, and I'm excited to dive into this thing. It's not really super ergonomic, it's just square with rounded edges. And not to copy other handhelds, but I think it would have benefited from having some grooves in the back or padding deemed by some as bum cheeks that Anbernic likes to put on sometimes. The D-pad at first feels okay, but it doesn't feel like it sticks out enough. It's as if they were being cheap on the rubber membrane or something. Tilting feels mediocre and rotations feel a bit tight. Angles, though, feel okay. It just feels like it needs a simple modification here to push the D-pad up more. A thicker membrane underneath? The ABXY buttons are labeled on the unit, which I like. I don't think all the unit types come with buttons like this, so pay close attention if you're a stickler for this sort of thing. The buttons to me feel good, and they don't feel like there'll be a problem here. They're a tiny bit stiff, if I were to say anything, but this can happen on brand new units and will most likely wear down in time. There's an analog stick on the top left above the D-pad that feels okay. I wish it was clickable, but we can't have everything, I guess. The other control on the bottom is surprisingly a slider, giving me that PlayStation Portable experience that I'm sure people will have mixed feelings about. Aside from the cap popping off once, I don't hate it, and I'm kind of excited to play some PSP games on this thing to see what I fully think about it. It's kind of an unusual setup when you step back and look at it, but then again, it's kind of copying the layout of the Nintendo Switch. The screen is a decent size, I suppose, a 3.5-inch IPS, which is also a touchscreen. Its resolution is 640 by 480, which is good enough for most of what you'll be playing on this. The Retroid Pocket 2 Plus also has stereo speakers, which is a win for me. These are great, and I would admit better sound than the norm for handhelds at this price. There are also select, start, and home buttons on the bottom, which are barely sticking out. I wouldn't say it's the best design. I would prefer that they stick out a little more. Where they're located, I don't expect to be pressing them by accident or anything, but I'm not planning on pressing them too much either. They look good enough, so not a big deal. The top has a micro HDMI port, which I'm not even sure I have a converter for. It doesn't even come with one, so you might have to shop around. It also has a USB-C port for charging, a volume rocker, and a power button. It also, of course, has the trigger and shoulder buttons that click nicely. The labeled back ones, Z, L, and ZR are fine, but I wish they were as pronounced as the L and R ones. I'm not sure how much I'm going to use these, but I'm curious now, having them further in will affect gameplay. The bottom is nothing more than where the SD card goes in that will most likely host the games you add. Considering the device itself only has 32 gig built inside, if you want to play some higher end systems, you're going to need more space. I got mine without added games, so your results may vary depending on what you get. My first experience with this SD slot was that it didn't give up my SD card the first time I ejected it without using tweezers, and then it just sort of worked after that. Strange, but I'll chalk it up to bad luck, I guess. And before I forget, a headphone jack. Quick stats for the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus are the following. The processor is a Unisoc quad-core Tiger T3010. Graphics is a PowerVR GE8300. The memory is a 2 gig LP DDR4 RAM. The battery is a 4,000 milliamp hour battery that lasts around 5 hours. It has Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, a headphone jack, and HDMI out. Booting up the Retroid Pocket is basic enough and plays serious tribute to the Game Boy Color boot-up screen. If it's your first time booting up, you're most likely going to be asked some questions, just like booting up an Android tablet for the first time. If this is you, it's easy enough using the touchscreen and setting up your wireless, and asking what apps you want pre-installed. A big decision probably is choosing a launcher that saves you a bit of grief in the long run. I suggest the default RP2 Plus launcher. If you want anything better once you're comfortable, I would recommend Dijisho, a saving grace in my opinion for Android systems for more advanced users, which I talk about in better detail in a previous video if you're interested. Once fully set up, your Retroid Pocket 2 Plus pretty much runs like an Android tablet, complete with tons of emulators to choose from. It's entirely up to you to decide if these emulators are good enough, giving you the freedom to upgrade these or download alternatives. If you're more into just getting on with it, choose the Retroid launcher, add the systems you want, choose the ROM path, and you're off running. I'm not 100% sure if any of this works automatically for some people. It seems like I had to add my own ROMs and point each system to its respected ROM path, which is fine and good, but if you're new to this sort of thing, you may be banging your head against the wall. If you'd rather skip emulators and download Android games, the Retroid Pocket will not stop you. That's the beauty of running Android. Without too much effort, I was able to find and install AM2R, an Android handheld favorite, and it works perfectly. If you like Metroid, you don't want to miss out on this fan-made game that got pulled hours after being on the Android Play Store, for obvious reasons. Being an Android, keep in mind you can install anything you want on this. You can browse the internet, even install Netflix. The world is your oyster, honestly. Anyway, back to emulation. The Retroid Pocket 2 Plus can play most of the systems you expect it to. 8-bit and 16-bit games are not an issue here, and 32-bit systems look great as well. I would argue that this thing may have been made for the Game Boy Advance because the games just run perfectly and look great. The more troublesome systems like Nintendo 64, Dreamcast, and PSP don't really give any problems. It's only when venturing further with the more recent systems like Wii, GameCube, and PlayStation 2 you see this handheld's true colors. It's good to know that I'm 5 handhelds behind, so you know the latest Retroid will probably be able to handle these. Overall, you're not going to have too many problems here. And if you do, there are options like using RetroArch and its different cores instead, or even alternate emulators. For a full list of what works and what doesn't for the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, the Retroid community has a spreadsheet if you're interested. How's that for community love? I'll provide a link, no worries. Controls weren't as bad as I expected them to be, honestly. I didn't mind the D-pad not being pronounced as I wanted it to be. Plus, if I ever got annoyed with it, it's so easy to just switch to the analog stick and move on. It's not perfect. It doesn't feel like an Ambernick D-pad, but it could have been a lot worse. The buttons did feel a bit tight, but I got used to them after a bit of time. And when I expected the trigger and shoulder buttons to be a problem, they really weren't. I'm really having a good time with this. As far as the micro HDMI port, I scrounged around and found a converter. I plugged it in and of course it works fine. No complaints here. Still wish it had a normal HDMI port, or at least come with a converter, but I'm just being picky. With it having Bluetooth, you're also going to be pleased that you can sync up a controller and just use the system like it's a console. And that's a big bonus. Overall, how do I feel about the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus? The 3.5-inch screen, I'm afraid, is its biggest limitation. While it works well for reading text on the web or playing older games, it becomes challenging to read when playing the newer titles. The addition of a touchscreen is convenient and very responsive, but the small screen size can make it difficult to type accurately on the on-screen keyboard. I realize too that after heavy use, the plastic is a bit of a fingerprint magnet. It's one of those handhelds where I need a microfiber cloth nearby, so I can do a review on this without you getting too disgusted. Not a big deal, but I do find it a bit annoying. Maybe black shows prints more? Maybe I should have gotten the orange. I would argue that the slider control on the bottom right wasn't my favorite feature. I thought I'd like it more, but I really stay away from it, which I didn't think I'd do. I can fully understand why the Retroid Pocket 2S, its successor, decided to have 2 analog sticks. In fact, if you're considering this, I would argue unless if you can get a crazy deal, you might consider getting the Retroid Pocket 2S instead, or even a 3 for a better experience. Still, for the price of $99, it's a steal for what you're getting. With all that, handhelds that run on Android have a lot of flexibility, but they're a bit more challenging for newbies for sure. So if you have no experience with this sort of thing, you might just not know what to do with it until you watch a bunch of tutorials. And that's all I have to say about the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus. I like mine, but I secretly wish it was the 2S. But hey, don't tell my handheld this. It's very sensitive. Shh, it's okay. It's okay. You're the best Retroid I own, I promise. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for your support, and as always, I'll see you next time. Bye.
One night in the arcade, when all was calm, Zoltan found the Game Boy left like a time bomb. He picked it up and transferred